The desert base sat in the middle of endless dust and heat. From far away it looked like nothing more than a group of tents, metal containers, and a few tall antennas standing against the wide sky. During the day the sun burned the ground so hot that the air itself seemed to shake. At night the wind moved through the camp carrying sand across the paths between buildings. Soldiers moved through the base every day with a clear sense of purpose. Some checked equipment. Others prepared vehicles or studied maps before missions. Helicopters sometimes arrived suddenly, filling the air with noise and dust before disappearing again into the distance. In the center of the camp stood the field hospital. It was not large, but it was one of the most important places in the entire base. Whenever someone was injured, this was where they came first. Inside the hospital tent, the atmosphere felt different from the rest of the base. Instead of weapons and loud commands, there were medical kits, stretchers, and quiet conversations. The smell of antiseptic filled the air, mixing with the dry desert wind that slipped through the tent flaps. The medic assigned to that hospital worked long hours every single day. Most soldiers in the camp barely noticed her when they passed by. She usually moved quickly between patients, checking bandages, preparing supplies, or writing short notes about treatments. She did not speak loudly or try to stand out. Her focus was always on the people lying on the stretchers in front of her. Many of the soldiers respected medics in general. After all, they were the ones who kept people alive when missions went wrong. But respect did not always mean understanding. Some of the younger members of the special operations teams believed that real strength only came from fighting on the front lines. To them, the medics' world seemed far away from the dangers they faced during operations. One afternoon, a group of soldiers walked into the hospital after returning from a training exercise. One of them had twisted his ankle while moving across rough ground. It was not serious, but it needed attention. They helped their teammates sit on a stretcher while the medic examined the injury. As she wrapped the ankle carefully, one of the soldiers leaned against a nearby table and laughed. "Looks like you'll survive," he joked to his friend. "You're lucky we've got the base doctor here." Another soldier smiled and added, "Yeah, just the medic will fix you up." The words were not meant to be cruel. They were spoken casually, the way soldiers often joked with each other after a long day. But the phrase stayed in the air for a moment. Just the medic. The medic did not react. She simply finished securing the bandage and checked the soldier's foot again to make sure the support was tight enough. "You'll need to stay off it for a while," she said calmly. "Give it time to heal." The injured soldier nodded and thanked her. Within minutes the group left the hospital, still talking and laughing as they walked back toward their barracks. When the tent grew quiet again, the medic continued her work. She cleaned the instruments she had used, restocked supplies, and wrote down the details of the injury in a small notebook. To anyone watching, she looked like someone who had heard comments like that many times before. In truth, she had. Before being assigned to this base, she had worked in several other difficult places. Some had been busy military hospitals. Others were small forward stations where injured soldiers arrived almost every day. She had treated broken bones, burns, infections, and exhaustion. She had worked through nights when helicopters landed again and again carrying wounded troops. Those experiences had taught her something important. People often made quick judgments about others, especially in places where danger and stress were constant. But she had learned that there was no point arguing about respect. Respect was something that revealed itself over time. Later that evening, the sky turned deep orange as the sun dropped behind the desert horizon. The heat slowly faded, and the air became cooler. Inside the hospital tent, the medic checked her supplies again before the night shift began. Nighttime was unpredictable on a military base. Sometimes it passed quietly with no emergencies at all. Other nights could become busy very quickly. A helicopter crew walked in briefly to collect extra medical packs for a mission scheduled later that week. They spoke politely but did not stay long. Not long after that, another soldier arrived with a cut above his eyebrow. He had walked into a low metal beam while carrying equipment. The medic cleaned the wound and closed it with small medical strips while the soldier sat still and tried not to laugh at his own mistake. Moments like these were common. Small injuries, small problems, quick solutions. Yet every medic knew that the calm moments were important because they allowed preparation for the moments that were not calm at all. As the evening continued, the camp lights switched on one by one across the base. Guards took their positions along the perimeter, watching the darkness beyond the fences. Inside the hospital, the medic checked the beds that were ready for patients. Everything needed to be organized. When emergencies happened, every second mattered. While she worked, a small group of soldiers passed by outside the tent. Their voices carried through the open flap. One of them spoke about an upcoming mission. Another joked about how the medic probably had the easiest job on the base. "Must be nice staying in the medical tent all day," he said. "No patrols, no desert hikes, just bandages and paperwork." A few others laughed. The medic heard the voices but did not react. She simply continued arranging the supplies on the table in front of her. The truth was that none of those soldiers knew much about her background. Before becoming a medic, she had gone through demanding training programs designed to prepare medical personnel for combat environments. The training had been intense, both physically and mentally. She had learned how to stabilize injuries while under pressure. She had practiced moving patients quickly while chaos surrounded her. She had even trained with weapons for situations where medical staff might need to defend themselves or their patients. Those lessons were not something she talked about often. For her, the most important part of the job was simple: keeping people alive. Outside the tent, the wind picked up slightly, pushing sand along the ground in quiet waves. The base seemed peaceful. Inside the hospital, the medic sat down briefly to review medical reports from earlier in the week. Several soldiers were still recovering from previous missions. Most were expected to return to duty soon. One patient slept quietly in the corner bed after receiving treatment earlier that day for dehydration. The medic checked his condition again, adjusting the blanket before returning to her desk. Hours passed slowly. The sounds of the base faded into the background as the night deepened. A few vehicles moved along the dirt road near the hospital before parking near the command area. Somewhere in the distance, a radio crackled with short updates between patrol units. Everything felt normal, but experience had taught the medic something else as well. In places like this, normal could change very quickly. She stood and walked toward the entrance of the tent, looking out across the dimly lit base. A row of lights marked the outer fence far away. Beyond that fence stretched miles of empty desert. The wind carried a faint chill now that the sun was gone. For a moment, the base looked completely calm. Soldiers talked quietly near a vehicle. A guard walked along the perimeter path. The hospital tent behind her glowed softly under the lights. It was the kind of night when most people believed nothing unusual would happen. The medic stepped back inside and checked the clock hanging on a support pole. The night shift had just begun. She had no way of knowing that before the night was over, everything at the base would change. And the people who once called her just the medic would soon see a side of her they had never imagined. The night settled slowly over the desert base. The last light of the sun had disappeared hours earlier, leaving only a dark sky filled with quiet stars. The wind had calmed, and the camp lights created small circles of yellow glow across the dusty ground. Inside the field hospital, everything felt calm. The medic moved quietly between the beds, checking on the few soldiers resting inside. One was still sleeping after recovering from dehydration earlier in the day. Another sat upright reading a small book while waiting for a helicopter evacuation scheduled the next morning. The tent was peaceful, almost too peaceful. Outside, the base continued its usual nighttime routine. Guards walked along the perimeter fence while vehicles sat parked near the command area. Radios crackled occasionally with short updates between different teams. Most nights passed this way. Slow, quiet, and uneventful. The medic sat down at a small desk near the center of the hospital tent. She reviewed the medical notes she had written earlier and updated the supply list. A few items were running low, and she planned to request replacements in the morning. While she worked, she listened to the normal sounds of the base. Distant footsteps, a truck engine starting, the low murmur of soldiers talking somewhere beyond the tent. Everything sounded ordinary, But deep in the distance, something unexpected was happening. Far beyond the base perimeter, the motion sensors that monitored the outer desert quietly detected movement. At first the signals were faint, almost easy to dismiss. The desert often fooled the sensors with animals or shifting wind patterns. Still, the system automatically sent a signal to the base security team. At one of the guard stations, a soldier leaned closer to the monitoring screen, trying to understand what he was seeing. The signal appeared again, stronger this time. He picked up his radio and spoke quickly. The quiet base began to shift. Inside the hospital tent, the medic did not hear the radio call. She was busy preparing a fresh bandage for the soldier who had cut his eyebrow earlier that evening. "Hold still," she said gently as she checked the wound again. The soldier smiled slightly. "You'd think after years of training I'd be able to avoid a metal beam." She gave a small nod and finished the bandage. "You'll be fine," she said. "Just try not to hit your head again tonight." He laughed softly and stood up from the bed. Just as he stepped toward the exit of the tent, a loud alarm suddenly echoed across the entire base. The sound cut through the quiet night like a sharp blade. For a second, nobody moved. Then the alarm sounded again, louder and more urgent. The soldier near the exit froze and turned back toward the medic. "That's not a drill," he said quietly. Outside, the comm base instantly turned into controlled chaos. Soldiers rushed from their tents and barracks. Some grabbed equipment while others ran toward defensive positions. Radio chatter filled the air as security teams tried to understand the situation. The medic stepped closer to the tent entrance and looked outside. She saw soldiers moving quickly across the open ground. A vehicle sped past toward the outer perimeter while guards adjusted their positions along the fence line. Something serious was happening. The soldier with the bandaged eyebrow spoke into his radio, trying to contact his team. The signal was filled with voices speaking at once. Inside the hospital, the sleeping patient woke up suddenly, confused by the loud alarm. "What's going on?" he asked. The medic walked over to him calmly. "Stay where you are," she said gently. "Everything will be fine." Even though she spoke calmly, her mind was already working quickly. Field hospitals were never placed directly in the center of a base. They were often located slightly away from heavy equipment areas so medical staff could work in a quieter space. That location made the hospital peaceful most of the time. But during an attack, it also meant the tent could become exposed. Another sound suddenly echoed through the night. Distant gunfire. It was faint at first, but unmistakable. The soldier near the entrance looked outside again, his expression changing. "That's coming from the perimeter," he said. More radio messages filled the air outside. The medic could hear boots running past the tent as soldiers moved toward defensive positions. Inside the hospital, tension spread quickly among the patients. The soldier reading the book closed it slowly and placed it beside the bed. "Are they attacking the base?" he asked quietly. No one answered right away. Another burst of distant gunfire echoed through the night. The medic stepped toward the entrance again, watching carefully. In the distance, she could see small flashes of light near the outer fence line. The perimeter guards were already responding. A vehicle raced across the base carrying additional soldiers toward the fight. The soldier with the bandaged eyebrow tightened his grip on his radio. "Command is saying multiple intruders near the east side," he said. His voice was serious now. Inside the tent, the wounded soldiers looked at one another. None of them were in condition to join the fight outside. The medic understood the situation immediately. If attackers managed to break through the outer defenses and reach the inner part of the base, the field hospital would be vulnerable. And inside this tent were injured soldiers who could not defend themselves. Another loud crack of gunfire sounded closer than before. The base lights flickered slightly as vehicles moved quickly across the compound. Outside the hospital tent, a pair of soldiers ran past while carrying additional equipment. One of them shouted something into a radio before disappearing into the darkness. The medic turned back toward the patients inside the hospital. "Everyone stay calm," she said firmly. "Move your beds away from the entrance." The soldiers inside the tent followed her instructions quickly. Even though they were injured, They understood the importance of staying out of direct view from outside. The medic moved with surprising speed, helping adjust the stretchers and equipment so the patients were positioned farther from the tent opening. Her movements were calm and precise. She had trained for situations like this before. The soldier with the eyebrow bandage watched her for a moment. Earlier that day, he had heard someone jokingly call her, "just the medic." Now he saw something different. She was not panicking. She was thinking ahead. Outside, the sounds of the battle grew louder. More gunfire, shouting, engines. The attack on the base was real. Another radio call came through. The soldier listened carefully and then looked toward the medic. "They're saying a small group got closer than expected," he said quietly. The medic nodded once. She walked toward a locked storage cabinet near the side of the tent. Inside were emergency supplies kept for the most serious situations. She opened the cabinet and quickly checked the contents. Medical kits, extra lights, protective equipment, and something else. She closed the cabinet again but did not remove anything yet. The soldier watching her seemed confused. "You expecting them to come here?" he asked. The medic looked toward the entrance of the tent again. Her voice remained calm. "I'm preparing in case they do." Outside, the gunfire suddenly became much closer. This time, everyone inside the hospital heard it clearly. The patient who had been sleeping earlier sat up quickly, eyes wide with concern. The medic walked back toward the center of the tent and checked each patient again. She adjusted bandages, checked breathing, and made sure everyone was stable. Even in the middle of rising danger, she continued doing her job. But now her attention moved between the patients and the entrance of the tent. Moments passed slowly. Each sound outside made the tension grow heavier. Then footsteps suddenly rushed past the hospital. A soldier shouted something to another team nearby. The medic could hear the urgency in their voices. The fight was getting closer to this part of the base. Inside the tent, the wounded soldiers exchanged worried looks. The one with the radio spoke again. "Command says reinforcements are moving toward the east side," he said. "But they're still trying to push the attackers back." Another burst of gunfire echoed across the base. This time it was close enough that dust fell lightly from the hospital tent roof. The medic took a slow breath. She walked once more toward the storage cabinet and placed her hand on the handle. For a moment she paused, listening carefully to the sounds outside. Then she opened the cabinet again. Inside, among the emergency supplies, was a secured rifle. The soldier with the radio noticed immediately. He stared at her in surprise. Until that moment, many people on the base had believed the medic only worked with bandages and medical tools. But as the gunfire outside grew louder, something became clear. The quiet medic in the hospital tent was far more prepared than anyone had ever realized. The night air was tense, filled with the distant echoes of gunfire that grew louder with each passing second. Inside the field hospital, the medic moved quickly but carefully, her mind working faster than anyone else could see. The injured soldiers were scared, their breaths short and quick, but she stayed calm, giving them small instructions in a steady voice. "Stay low. Move the stretchers closer to the back. Keep calm," she said, each word precise and measured. Her presence alone seemed to calm those who were terrified, even if only slightly. The soldier with the bandaged eyebrow watched her with wide eyes. He had spent years in combat zones, yet he had never seen someone maintain such poise under pressure. He realized in that moment that this was no ordinary medic. She was more than someone who patched wounds. She was someone who could think and act when danger came directly to them. The medic moved to the storage cabinet and opened it with calm efficiency. She pulled out a rifle that had been kept secure for emergencies. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. Every movement was deliberate. The soldiers in the room exchanged glances. None of them expected this. The quiet woman they had called just a medic was now preparing to defend them. "Where are the attackers?" one of the soldiers whispered, still clutching his radio. "They're close," she replied quietly, scanning the entrance of the tent. "They're testing the perimeter. We need to be ready." She positioned herself near the opening of the hospital, careful to use the tent structure as cover. Every movement was calculated. She adjusted her stance, checked her sight, and made sure she had clear angles. It was clear to anyone watching that she had been trained for moments like this, though no one in the tent had seen this side of her before. Outside, the desert night was filled with the sounds of chaos. Gunfire echoed across the base. The faint silhouettes of attackers could be seen near the perimeter, moving quickly in the shadows. Vehicles moved past, carrying soldiers rushing to defend the base. The attackers thought they could reach the hospital unnoticed, but the medic was ready. The first shadow appeared near the edge of the tent. The medic stayed low, aiming carefully. She took a deep breath and fired. The shot was precise, stopping the intruder in their tracks. A second figure tried to approach, but another shot made them retreat. Each bullet she fired was controlled, measured, and purposeful. She was not panicking. She was protecting every life inside the hospital. The soldiers inside the tent watched in disbelief. The same woman they had underestimated, the one who had quietly worked on bandages and medical charts, was now holding back the threat outside. Their previous assumptions evaporated with every shot she fired. One of the soldiers whispered, "I didn't think she could," but didn't finish. Words were unnecessary. Everyone in the room knew they were witnessing something extraordinary. Between bursts of gunfire outside, the medic checked the patients inside. She adjusted a blanket here, reassured a soldier there. She never stopped being the healer even as she became the defender. The duality of her role amazed those watching. She was both protector and caregiver, moving seamlessly between two worlds that few could manage at once. The sound of running footsteps drew her attention to another side of the tent. Shadows moved in the dim light. She adjusted her aim and fired once more. The attackers paused, clearly not expecting resistance from this part of the base. She fired again, precise and efficient, creating a barrier that kept the enemy from reaching the vulnerable patients. Moments stretched like hours inside the hospital. Every sound outside was a potential threat, every shadow a possible intruder. The medic's training and focus were the only things standing between the wounded soldiers and danger. The soldier with the radio tried to contact the command team again. "The hospital is under threat. The medic is defending it," he reported urgently. Outside, reinforcements were moving toward the hospital, but they were still several minutes away. Every second counted. The attackers were testing the defenses, but the medic's steady hands and sharp eyes kept them at bay. Inside, the wounded soldiers began to realize that the person they had dismissed as just a medic was the only reason they were safe. Fear mixed with respect in their eyes. They watched her move from patient to patient, from firing position to monitoring the room, seamlessly balancing protection with care. A burst of gunfire outside made the tent shudder slightly. The medic adjusted her position and fired again. The attackers hesitated, unsure of what awaited them behind the hospital walls. Her calm confidence was intimidating. Every movement showed discipline and skill. One of the soldiers asked quietly, "Have you ever done this before?" The medic didn't answer. Her eyes stayed fixed on the tent entrance. Her silence spoke more than words ever could. Her actions told the story of someone who had been trained for this, someone who was ready for moments when ordinary people would freeze. The injured soldiers inside began to feel a small sense of hope. They were in danger, yes, but the medic's presence reminded them that not all hope was lost. Even as fear surrounded them, they had someone who could protect them, someone who would not let them down. The sound of heavy footsteps grew closer. The attackers were trying to find a way inside. The medic's movements remained precise. Each shot she fired was controlled, deliberate. She used every bit of cover the tent offered, making herself a difficult target. Between shots, she checked on the patients. "Stay down. Stay calm," she instructed. Her voice never wavered. She moved from one side of the tent to the other, ensuring everyone was positioned safely. The soldier with the radio watched in awe. "I can't believe this," he muttered under his breath. "She's incredible." Outside, the attackers regrouped, realizing that the hospital was not going to be an easy target. Her defensive actions bought crucial time for the base reinforcements to arrive. Every second she held the line made a difference. The wounded soldiers began to whisper among themselves, trying to process what they were seeing. "She's not just a medic," one said. She's a fighter too." The medic heard them but did not respond. Her focus never left the tent entrance. Her training, her experience, and her calm under pressure guided every action. She knew the importance of patience, accuracy, and timing. Minutes felt like hours, but eventually, the first reinforcements approached the hospital. Their presence gave the soldiers inside a glimmer of relief, though the medic continued to watch the entrance until the attackers retreated further away. The first group of attackers moved back, confused and frustrated. The medic's precision and discipline had made the hospital a target they could not easily overcome. Finally, when the immediate danger passed, the medic lowered her rifle slightly. She quickly checked on each patient, making sure they were unharmed. Every bandage, every piece of equipment, every patient's position was accounted for. The soldier with the bandaged eyebrow let out a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding. I can't believe what just happened," he said. The medic gave a small nod, her expression calm but focused. She began moving between the patients again, tending to small needs, adjusting blankets and checking vital signs. The injured soldiers inside the hospital were stunned. The quiet, unassuming woman they had dismissed was the reason they were still alive. Respect replaced disbelief in their eyes. They realized they had underestimated her, and that mistake could have been costly if she had not been so prepared. Outside, the base began to regain control. Soldiers moved to secure the perimeter, vehicles patrolled the area, and radio communication returned to a calmer rhythm. Inside the hospital, the medic continued her work. She treated small cuts, checked vitals, and reassured each soldier. Her calm presence reminded everyone that the danger, while serious, was under control for the moment. The soldier with the radio turned to her finally. I'm sorry we called you just a medic," he said quietly. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Words were not necessary. Her actions had already spoken louder than anything anyone could say. That night, the hospital tent remained a place of calm in the middle of chaos, thanks to her skill, training, and courage. The wounded soldiers had witnessed something they would never forget. The person they had dismissed as just a medic had become their protector. She had shown them a side of herself that few had ever seen, and in doing so, earned a respect that would last far longer than any mission or operation. Even as the night slowly passed and the distant sounds of the base returned to normal, the impact of her actions remained. Inside the tent, everyone knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. And for the medic, the night was not about glory or recognition. It was about keeping people alive no matter what it took. Her calm, her focus, and her courage had turned a hospital tent into a stronghold. And in the minds of every soldier inside, one thing was now clear. She was no longer just a medic. She was a protector, a fighter, and someone they could rely on when everything else seemed uncertain. The base was still alive with noise from the skirmish, but the field hospital had become its own small island of controlled chaos. Inside, the medic moved with purpose, her mind balancing two tasks at once, keeping the injured safe and defending the tent. Every time the flap of the tent rustled, she lifted her rifle slightly, eyes scanning for any movement. The wounded soldiers were tense, some whispering in fear, others gripping their stretchers for support. None of them could move far. Their injuries kept them grounded. Yet they watched her closely, feeling a mix of fear and awe. They had been the ones to underestimate her, to call her just a medic. That mistake was now obvious, and the reality of her skills became impossible to ignore. Outside, footsteps approached again, heavier this time. The attackers had regrouped, moving carefully, testing the defenses of the hospital. They had no idea who they were up against. The medic did not panic. She took a calm breath, steadied her rifle, and waited for the right moment. Every movement she made was deliberate, designed to protect those inside. A shadow fell across the tent flap. The medic's eyes locked onto it instantly. She fired once, precise and quick. The attacker staggered back, clearly caught off guard. Another shadow moved to the side, trying to find an opening. She adjusted her aim and fired again, her hands steady despite the tension. Inside, the soldiers watched silently. No one had ever seen her like this. The same quiet woman who had patched up minor injuries and handed out bandages was now the reason their lives were protected. She moved with confidence, always aware of her surroundings, always ready to act. A soldier with a broken arm whispered to another, She's incredible. I never thought a medic could." His voice trailed off as another shot rang out outside. She didn't answer. Her focus was on the tent and the perimeter. Her actions spoke louder than words ever could. She scanned the shadows carefully, checking for movement. Every patient's safety was her first priority. Time stretched. Minutes felt like hours. The gunfire outside continued in short bursts, the attackers testing the hospital's defenses. Reinforcements were on their way, but until they arrived, the medic was the only shield between danger and the wounded soldiers. The soldier with the radio tried to call command again. "The medic is holding the hospital." "Repeat, the medic is holding the hospital," he said urgently. His voice shook slightly. Inside, another patient, recovering from dehydration, tried to sit up. "Is it safe?" he whispered, eyes wide with worry. "Stay down," the medic said calmly, moving toward him. "You're safe as long as you follow instructions." She adjusted his position slightly, ensuring he was protected behind the stretchers and equipment. Another figure approached the tent flap. The medic's rifle lifted smoothly. She fired, and the shadow retreated. Outside, the attackers were beginning to realize that the hospital was not an easy target. Her presence had turned it into a fortress. The wounded soldiers exchanged glances, respect mixed with disbelief in their eyes. The soldier with the bandaged eyebrow spoke softly. "I never thought she could do this. I was wrong." The medic heard him but did not respond. Words were unnecessary. Every action she took was teaching them a lesson they would never forget. Courage, focus, and preparation were worth more than any title or assumption. Another burst of gunfire came from the perimeter, louder this time. The base was still in chaos, but the medic remained composed. She moved along the tent, checking each patient quickly while keeping an eye on the entrance. Every second counted. The injured soldiers began to whisper among themselves. "She's not just a medic," one said. She's a fighter." The medic continued her work. She adjusted blankets, checked vital signs, and reassured the wounded, all while keeping her rifle ready. Her ability to remain calm in the middle of danger was a lesson in itself. The sound of approaching reinforcements became clearer. Soldiers shouted in the distance as they moved to secure the area near the hospital. Their arrival brought a small sense of relief, but the medic's focus never wavered. She stayed alert, covering the tent until the attackers moved back further. Inside, the patients began to relax slightly, though fear was still present. They had witnessed something extraordinary. The quiet, unassuming woman they had dismissed was now the one keeping them alive. The soldier with the radio looked at her with awe. You saved us," he said quietly. The medic nodded, returning to her tasks. She checked each patient carefully, adjusting bandages, ensuring everyone was stable. She did not celebrate or show emotion. Her reward was seeing her patients safe. Outside, the attackers retreated, realizing the hospital could not be easily taken. The medic had held the line alone until reinforcements could arrive. Her actions had bought crucial time and protected lives. Inside the tent, the soldiers now looked at her with new respect. They had underestimated her, but that mistake had been corrected in the most intense way possible. The medic continued her work quietly, tending to minor injuries, checking equipment, and keeping a watchful eye on the entrance. She moved seamlessly between healing and defending, showing that courage was not always loud, but it was always effective. The soldier with the bandaged eyebrow finally spoke again. I'm sorry we ever doubted you," he said softly. She gave a small nod, continuing her work. Her actions had already spoken louder than any apology. The night slowly passed, the chaos outside the hospital gradually fading. Reinforcements had secured the perimeter, and the immediate danger was gone. The tent was quiet again, except for the sounds of the medic moving and tending to her patients. The wounded soldiers rested as best they could, finally understanding the true value of the person they had called just a medic. She had defended them, protected them, and remained calm under pressure when it mattered most. Her courage had turned a simple hospital tent into a fortress. Her focus had saved lives. Her presence had inspired respect. And even though she did not seek recognition, the soldiers inside knew they had witnessed something remarkable. The night ended with the medic ensuring every patient was stable, every piece of equipment in place, and every soldier inside safe. Her actions had left a lasting impression. They had learned a lesson about judgment, about courage, and about the quiet strength that sometimes hides in the most unexpected people. From that night forward, the soldiers would never underestimate her again. The person they had once called just a medic had become a protector, a fighter, and someone who could be relied upon when everything else seemed uncertain. Even as the base returned to normal, the impact of her actions lingered. Inside the hospital tent, calm returned, but respect and admiration filled the space. Every patient understood that they had survived not just because of training or luck, but because of the courage and skill of the medic who had refused to let fear take control. She had held the line, saved lives, and earned respect the hard way, proving that sometimes the quietest people possess the greatest strength. The sun rose slowly over the desert, casting a soft orange glow across the base. The night of chaos had passed, but the air still carried a sense of tension. Soldiers moved carefully through the camp, inspecting equipment and checking the perimeter. Radios crackled with routine messages instead of urgent calls. The base was returning to order, but the events of the previous night lingered in everyone's mind. Inside the field hospital, the medic worked quietly, just as she had done countless times before. She checked on the patients, adjusted bandages, and ensured that every piece of medical equipment was in place. Despite the intense battle from the night before, she moved with calm efficiency, as if nothing had changed. The soldiers inside the hospital looked at her differently now. Their eyes held a mix of respect, admiration, and gratitude. The same woman they had once dismissed as just a medic had stood between them and danger. She had faced the attackers without hesitation, protecting each patient with skill and courage. One soldier with a broken arm finally spoke, his voice still shaky. I don't know how to thank you," he said. "We wouldn't have made it without you." The medic gave a small nod, her expression calm. She did not need thanks or praise. Her purpose was clear: keep people alive. That had always been her mission, whether the soldiers recognized it or not. As she moved from one patient to another, she listened to their stories of the night. Some had barely been able to see what was happening outside the tent. Others had glimpsed shadows and heard the distant gunfire. All of them were amazed by the way she had handled the situation. Her courage had turned a vulnerable hospital into a protected stronghold. A soldier who had been joking earlier, the one who had called her just a medic, approached her quietly. His face was serious now, the playfulness gone. "I was wrong about you," he admitted. "We all were. You saved us all." The medic smiled faintly but did not speak. Words had never been necessary. Her actions had already told the story. Every patient had witnessed her bravery and skill. Every soldier inside the tent now understood that titles and assumptions meant little when real danger arrived. Outside the tent, the rest of the base was slowly recovering from the attack. Reinforcements had secured the perimeter, and teams were checking for any remaining threats. Vehicles moved carefully along the dirt paths, and guards adjusted their positions to ensure no one could approach unnoticed again. Back inside, the medic continued her work. She checked the vital signs of each soldier, adjusted blankets, and administered fluids where needed. Even after the danger had passed, her attention to detail never wavered. She knew that the small things mattered just as much as the big actions. The soldiers who had survived the attack began to talk quietly among themselves. "Did you see her?" one whispered. "She didn't panic once. She was incredible. She didn't just defend us, another added. She made sure we were safe the whole time. She's more than a medic. She's a protector. Their words reflected a shift in perception. The quiet woman who had once gone unnoticed had now earned a place of respect in their hearts. They realized that courage did not always announce itself with loud words or aggressive actions. Sometimes it was quiet, steady, and focused just like her. The soldier with the bandaged eyebrow approached her again. "We underestimated you," he said softly. "I never want to make that mistake again." The medic nodded. Her focus remained on the patients, ensuring that everyone was stable and comfortable. Her calm presence reassured them, even as the base around them returned to normal operations. Hours passed, and the base gradually settled. Soldiers moved efficiently, repairing equipment, securing supplies, and checking the fences. The events of the night were becoming stories that would be told over and over, but for those inside the hospital, the memory was vivid and unforgettable. The medic took a moment to rest, sitting at a small desk in the corner of the tent. She looked around at the soldiers who had been under her care, their eyes filled with gratitude and newfound respect. She had done her job as she always did, but the night had shown everyone something they had not expected. One of the younger soldiers, who had been skeptical of her abilities before, spoke up. "You didn't have to do what you did," he said. "You could have stayed safe inside, but you didn't. You protected us." The medic smiled faintly. "It's my duty," she said quietly. "I'm here to keep people alive. That's all that matters." The soldiers nodded, understanding the depth of her words. They realized that courage was not about seeking recognition or praise. It was about doing what needed to be done, even when no one is watching, even when the odds are against you. Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the desert. The base was calm now, the threat gone. Soldiers moved with a renewed sense of purpose, and the quiet hum of activity filled the air. The night's chaos had passed, but its lessons remained. Inside the hospital, the medic continued her routine. She checked the supplies, prepared for any new emergencies, and ensured that every soldier was comfortable. Her focus was unwavering, her dedication absolute. She had earned respect not through words, but through action. The soldiers who had witnessed her bravery began to speak quietly among themselves. "I can't believe we ever doubted her," one said. "She's not just a medic. She's someone we can rely on no matter what." Another added, "She saved all of us. We owe her more than we can ever say." The medic heard them but did not respond. She understood that her actions had spoken louder than any words could. Her mission was to protect and heal, and she had done both with courage and skill. As the day went on, the base returned to its routine. Soldiers prepared for new missions, equipment was checked, and the hospital remained ready for any emergency. Yet the story of the medic's actions during the attack spread quickly. Everyone who heard it was impressed by her bravery and dedication. The soldier with the bandaged eyebrow approached her one last time before leaving the hospital. "Thank you," he said simply. "We'll never forget what you did." The medic gave a small nod, returning to her work. She did not seek recognition or praise. Her satisfaction came from knowing that the soldiers she cared for were safe. Throughout the day, more soldiers came to the hospital, checking on their injured comrades and offering quiet thanks to the medic. Each gesture was a reminder of the impact she had made. Her actions had earned respect, trust, and admiration in a way that words alone never could. By the end of the day, the hospital tent was calm once more. The medic moved between patients, ensuring everyone was stable and comfortable. The night of danger was over, but its lessons remained. The soldiers inside the tent had seen courage, skill, and dedication in its purest form. They had witnessed the quiet strength of someone who had been underestimated, only to prove that true courage often comes from those who act without seeking attention. The medic had shown them that being just a medic was never the full story. As the sun set again, casting a warm glow over the desert, the soldiers who had survived the night reflected on what they had seen. The medic had not only saved their lives, she had earned their lasting respect. They would never forget the lessons of courage, focus, and dedication she had taught them. In the quiet moments of the evening, the medic continued her work, tending to each patient, preparing supplies, and ensuring that the hospital was ready for whatever might come next. She had faced danger, protected the wounded, and remained calm when fear threatened to take over. Her actions had changed the way the soldiers saw her forever. No longer would they call her just a medic. She was a protector, a fighter, and someone they could trust with their lives. And as the stars appeared in the desert sky, the medic worked silently, a quiet hero in a world that often overlooked the courage of those who serve without seeking recognition. She had proven, in the most intense way possible, that true strength often comes from the unassuming, the quiet, and the prepared. Her story that day became one that would be remembered across the base, shared among soldiers as an example of courage, dedication, and the quiet heroism that can change lives when it matters most. The medic did not need to hear the praise. She had done her duty. She had saved lives. And in doing so, she had earned a respect that would last far beyond the events of that day. The soldiers who had once doubted her had learned a valuable lesson. Never underestimate someone who quietly prepares, stays calm, and puts others before themselves. The night was over. The danger had passed. And the medic, in her quiet, steady way, had shown everyone the true meaning of courage, skill, and selfless dedication.